The stars looked different now that most of them belonged to someone else. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Kepler Station watching the darkness beyond, knowing that somewhere out there alien ships were moving closer to finish what they had started 30 years ago. The Vorthan Empire had been patient and methodical in their conquest of human space. They did not rush into battle like savage beasts or demand immediate surrender like desperate warlords. Instead, they studied each human world, learned its weaknesses, and then struck with overwhelming force at precisely the right moment. Colony after colony had fallen to their calculated approach, and now only a handful of worlds still flew the blue and white banner of the Terran Federation. Morrison's reflection in the reinforced viewport showed a man aged beyond his 52 years. Gray streaks ran through his once black hair, and deep lines carved paths around his eyes from too many sleepless nights planning desperate battles. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Federation Navy, though the golden eagles on his collar felt heavier each day as the number of ships under his command continued to shrink. Behind him, the command center of Kepler Station buzzed with controlled activity. Officers moved between workstations, their voices low and professional despite the weight of their situation. Banks of monitors displayed tactical information, fleet positions, and status reports from the remaining human worlds. The picture they painted was grim, but not yet hopeless. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes approached from the main tactical station, her boots clicking softly against the metal deck plating. She was 34 years old with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in regulation style. Hayes had served under Morrison for 6 years, and he trusted her judgment more than anyone else on his staff. "Admiral, we've received confirmation from the outer sensor array," Hayes said, stopping beside him at the viewport. "Long-range scans show massive fleet movements in the Arcturus sector. The Vorthans are consolidating their forces." Morrison nodded without surprise. Intelligence reports had suggested this moment would come eventually. The alien empire had spent 3 decades methodically conquering human territory, but they had always left their enemies with hope, always allowed some worlds to remain free. Now it seemed they were ready to finish the job. "How many ships?" Morrison asked. "Our best estimate is between 2,000 and 3,000 vessels," Hayes replied. "That's larger than any fleet they've deployed against us before." The numbers hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Morrison's entire force consisted of barely 200 ships, most of them showing battle damage from previous engagements. Many of his crews had been fighting for years without proper rest or refit. They were brave and experienced, but courage alone would not stop 3,000 enemy warships. "They're not taking any chances this time," Morrison said. "Nexus Prime wants to end this war quickly and completely." Nexus Prime was the supreme commander of the Vorthan military forces, a crystalline being from a species that communicated through resonant frequencies. Human intelligence knew very little about the alien leader except that he had never lost a major engagement, and showed no mercy to those who opposed the Empire's expansion. Hayes pulled out a datapad and activated its holographic display. A 3-dimensional map appeared showing human space as a collection of blue dots scattered across the galaxy. Most of the map glowed red, marking territory controlled by the Vorthan Empire. The blue areas had shrunk dramatically over the past 3 decades. "Sir, there's something else," Hayes said. "We intercepted a broad-spectrum transmission from the Vorthan fleet. It appears to be directed at all remaining human worlds." Morrison turned away from the viewport to face her fully. "Let me hear it." Hayes touched a control on her datapad, and the command center speakers crackled to life. The voice that emerged was not human, but the translation software rendered it in clear, emotionless words. "People of the Terran Federation, I am Nexus Prime, Supreme Commander of the Vorthan Empire. For 30 years, your species has resisted the natural order of galactic civilization. You have chosen conflict over cooperation, war over peace. This resistance ends now." The message continued with mechanical precision. "You have 72 hours to surrender all remaining military forces and accept integration into the Empire. Your worlds will be occupied, your populations relocated to appropriate sectors, and your military vessels will be decommissioned. Compliance will ensure the survival of your species in a diminished but protected status. Morrison felt his jaw tighten as the alien voice spelled out humanity's fate with casual indifference. The Vorthon spoke of relocation and integration, but every human knew what those terms really meant. Humanity would become a slave species, their children raised to serve alien masters, their culture slowly erased over generations of careful conditioning. However, the message continued, if you choose to maintain your resistance after the deadline expires, the Empire will demonstrate the futility of further conflict. No human world will be spared, no human ship will escape. Your species will join the catalog of extinct civilizations that chose pride over survival. The transmission ended with a burst of static, leaving the command center in heavy silence. Officers at their workstations had stopped their activities to listen, and now they waited for their admiral's response to what amounted to an ultimatum of extinction. Morrison looked around at the faces of his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear in their expressions. These men and women had volunteered to serve in humanity's darkest hour, knowing that their chances of survival were slim. They deserved better than empty reassurances, but they also deserved to know that their sacrifice would mean something. Broadcast a response on all frequencies, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the command center. This is Admiral Jake Morrison, commanding officer of Kepler Station, and the remaining forces of the Terran Federation Navy. We have received your ultimatum, and our answer is simple. Come and take it. A few officers smiled at the ancient phrase, recognizing the defiant words spoken by defenders throughout human history when faced with impossible odds. It was not a sophisticated diplomatic response, but it captured something essentially human that no amount of alien logic could understand. Hayes nodded approvingly and moved to relay the message. As she worked, Morrison returned his attention to the viewport and the stars beyond. Somewhere in the darkness, 3,000 enemy ships were preparing to end humanity's presence in the galaxy. The rational choice would be surrender, accepting slavery in exchange for survival, but humans had never been entirely rational, especially when cornered. Deep beneath Kepler Station, in classified research levels that few people knew existed, Dr. Peter Kane and his team were working frantically on something that might change the odds. Morrison did not fully understand the technical details of Project Titan, but he knew it represented humanity's last, desperate gamble against extinction. The next 72 hours would determine whether humans joined the ranks of the Vorthon, Empire subject species, or whether they would make the aliens pay such a price for victory that other civilizations might remember and take hope from their example. Morrison straightened his uniform and walked back toward the tactical displays. There was work to do. The lift descended through 40 levels of Kepler Station before reaching the classified research sections that existed in the station's deepest core. Admiral Morrison's security clearance opened doors that few people even knew existed, leading him through corridors lined with reinforced bulkheads and guarded by automated defense systems. The air here felt different, charged with the energy of desperate innovation and the weight of humanity's last hope. Dr. Peter Kane waited for him. In the primary laboratory, a vast chamber carved from the asteroid that formed Kepler Station's foundation. The scientist was a thin man in his early 50s with wild gray hair and eyes that burned with the intensity of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. His white lab coat showed stains from various chemicals and his hands shook slightly, from too much caffeine and too little rest. "Admiral," Kane said, gesturing toward the massive construction that dominated the center of the laboratory. "Welcome to Project Titan." Morrison stopped and stared at the enormous structure taking shape before him. The hull of what would become the USS Liberty stretched nearly 2 kilometers in length, its dark metallic surface gleaming under the harsh worklights. Hundreds of technicians swarmed over the vessel like ants, welding armor plates, installing weapon systems, and connecting power conduits that glowed with barely contained energy. "She's beautiful," Morrison said, and meant it despite the ship's intimidating appearance. Kane smiled for the first time in days. She's more than beautiful, Admiral. She's revolutionary. Everything we've learned about warfare, engineering, and alien technology has gone into this design. The Liberty represents humanity's refusal to accept defeat. They walked along a catwalk that ran the length of the construction bay, giving Morrison a better view of the Dreadnought's impressive features. The hull incorporated a nano-composite armor that could adapt to different types of damage, literally learning from each impact to become more resistant to future attacks. Weapon hardpoints dotted the surface like the spines of some prehistoric beast, each one capable of housing different armament configurations depending on tactical needs. The power core is our biggest achievement, Kane explained as they reached an observation platform overlooking the ship's central section. We've managed to stabilize zero-point energy extraction to a degree that most physicists said was impossible. The output is incredible, enough to power systems that would require multiple fusion reactors on conventional vessels. Morrison nodded, though he understood only the basic concepts behind the technology. What mattered was that human ingenuity had found ways to squeeze more performance from exotic physics than alien engineers had thought possible. The Vorthans had developed these technologies first, but they had applied them conservative following established patterns that had worked for centuries. The real innovation is in the adaptive systems, Kane continued, leading Morrison toward another section of the catwalk. Traditional warships have fixed capabilities. Once you launch them, their role in battle is predetermined. The Liberty can reconfigure itself during combat, changing weapon loadouts, shield patterns, even hull configuration to match tactical requirements. They stopped at a platform where Captain Roy Davis waited with several other officers. Davis was a veteran of the Siege of New Geneva, one of the few fleet commanders who had managed to extract his forces intact when that colony fell to Vorthan assault. He was 43 years old, with graying brown hair and the steady eyes of someone who had seen too much combat but refused to be broken by it. Captain Davis will command the Liberty, Morrison said, making the introduction formal. He has more experience fighting Vorthan fleets than any other officer in our service. Davis saluted crisply. Admiral, I've been reviewing the ship's specifications with Dr. Kane's team. The capabilities are impressive, but I have concerns about crew training. Most of our people have never worked with systems this advanced. Kane gestured toward another group of officers standing near the ship's primary access ramp. That's where Chief Engineer Betty Adams comes in. She's been working with the construction teams from the beginning and knows every system on the ship. Her people will train your crew as we complete the final installations. Betty Adams was a compact woman in her late 30s with short blonde hair and the confident bearing of someone who understood machinery better than most people understood themselves. She wore the dark green uniform of the engineering corps with the insignia of a chief petty officer. Her hands showed the calluses and scars that came from years of hands-on work with starship systems. Admiral, Adams said, stepping forward to join the conversation. The Liberty's engineering sections are unlike anything we've built before. The power distribution network alone requires a completely different approach to damage control and system management. We're essentially learning how to operate her as we build her. Morrison appreciated the honesty. Too many officers tried to hide problems rather than address them directly. How long do we have before she's operational? Kane checked his datapad, scrolling through construction schedules and testing protocols. 48 hours until basic systems are online. Another 12 hours for final calibrations and crew familiarization. She'd be ready to launch before the Vorthan deadline expires. What about her AI systems? Morrison asked. He had read reports about the experimental artificial intelligence that would help coordinate the ship's complex systems, but the details remained classified above his level. Kane's expression became more serious. That's our most ambitious innovation, Admiral. We call Prometheus can process tactical data faster than any human crew. It can coordinate defensive systems, weapon targeting, and evasive maneuvers simultaneously while analyzing enemy patterns for weaknesses. Davis looked troubled. Doctor, I've commanded warships for 15 years. The idea of turning tactical decisions over to a computer makes me uncomfortable. Prometheus won't replace human judgment, Kane assured him. Think of it as the ultimate tactical officer, one that can process information and execute decisions at superhuman speed. You remain in command, but you'll have capabilities that no other captain in history has possessed. Morrison understood the captain's concerns. Human naval tradition emphasized the importance of command authority and the responsibility that came with making life-or-death decisions. Sharing that responsibility with an artificial intelligence represented a fundamental change in how humans fought their battles. Adams stepped closer to the group, her voice carrying the practical tone of someone who dealt with mechanical realities rather than philosophical concerns. Sir, the eye integration is necessary because of the ship's complexity. The Liberty has over 2 million individual systems that need coordination during combat. No human crew could manage that level of detail while fighting for their lives. The group stood in contemplative silence for several moments, watching the construction teams work with desperate efficiency. Everyone understood that they were witnessing something historic, the birth of a weapon that would either save humanity or serve as their species' final monument to defiance. Kane broke the silence by activating a holographic display that showed the Liberty's internal structure in cutaway detail. Admiral, this ship represents everything we are as a species. Our refusal to accept limitations, our ability to adapt and innovate under pressure, our determination to fight even when victory seems impossible. Morrison studied the hologram, seeing past the technical specifications to the symbol it represented. The Liberty was more than a warship. It was humanity's declaration that they would not quietly surrender to extinction. Whether she succeeded or failed, the galaxy would remember that humans had built something magnificent in their darkest hour. Gentlemen, lady, Morrison said, addressing the group with formal ceremony, you have 48 hours to complete the impossible. The survival of our species depends on your success. The countdown to humanity's future had begun. The Vorthan invasion fleet arrived in the Kepler system exactly when their ultimatum expired, emerging from hyperspace in perfect geometric formations that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Captain Roy Davis watched the enemy ships materialize on his tactical displays from the bridge of the USS Liberty, counting vessel after vessel until the numbers became meaningless. 3,000 alien warships arranged themselves with mathematical precision, their hulls gleaming silver against the darkness of space. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes from her position at the tactical station. She had transferred to the Liberty as the ship's executive officer, bringing her expertise in Vorthan battle tactics to humanity's last hope. "I've never seen so many ships in one place." The Liberty floated in the shadow of Kepler Station, her dark hull nearly invisible against the backdrop of the asteroid base. Every system on the Dreadnought hummed with barely contained power as Captain Davis prepared to give the order that would either save humanity or witness its final defeat. The crew had trained for 36 hours straight, learning to operate systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Dr. Peter Kane stood near the rear of the bridge, monitoring the ship's experimental systems through a portable interface. The artificial intelligence Prometheus processed incoming sensor data faster than human minds could comprehend, analyzing enemy formations and calculating attack vectors with inhuman precision. The AIS recommendations appeared on tactical displays throughout the bridge, offering suggestions that no human tactician would have considered. "Enemy fleet is assuming standard occupation formation," Hayes reported, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "They expect us to surrender now that they've demonstrated their strength." Chief Engineer Betty Adams spoke from the engineering station where she monitored the ship's revolutionary power systems. "Captain, all systems are operating within normal parameters. The zero-point core is stable and we have full power to all networks." Davis nodded and activated the ship's communication array. His message would broadcast on all frequencies, reaching not only the Vorthan fleet but every inhabited world in the galaxy through the quantum communication network. This is Captain Roy Davis of the USS Liberty, speaking for the Terran Federation and all free peoples of the galaxy. We have received your demand for surrender, and our answer remains unchanged. Come and take it. The response from the Vorthan flagship came immediately, transmitted in the cold mechanical voice of Nexus Prime. Captain Davis, your single vessel cannot hope to engage our entire fleet. Surrender now, and your crew will be permitted to live as servants of the Empire. Davis smiled grimly as he prepared to demonstrate exactly how wrong the alien commander was about human capabilities. Prometheus, execute attack pattern Alpha, all weapons, prepare to fire. The Liberty's hull transformed as its adaptive weapon systems reconfigured for assault. Quantum cannon turrets emerged from concealed positions while missile pods cycled into firing position. The ship's experimental shield generators created overlapping defensive fields that would confuse enemy targeting systems by making the Dreadnought appear to exist in multiple positions simultaneously. Target the lead elements of their formation, Davis ordered. Maximum firepower. The Liberty erupted in directed violence as every weapon system fired at once. Quantum cannons sent streams of coherent energy across the void while guided missiles accelerated toward their targets with inhuman precision. The first salvo struck the Vorthan fleet before they could react. Vaporizing 12 enemy vessels in brilliant flashes of released energy, the alien formation wavered as commanders tried to understand what had just happened. For 30 years, the Vorthans had faced human fleets that fought with predictable tactics and conventional weapons. The Liberty's opening attack demonstrated capabilities they had not expected, striking with precision and power that exceeded anything in their database of human military technology. Hayes coordinated the tactical display. As Prometheus fed targeting data to the weapon systems faster than human operators could process. Enemy ships are beginning evasive maneuvers. They're trying to surround us. Let them try, Davis replied, ordering the helm to execute a course that would take the Liberty directly through the center of the enemy formation. Prometheus, reconfigure shields for maximum deflection. Prepare secondary weapon systems. The Dreadnought plunged into the heart of the Vorthan fleet like a shark attacking a school of fish. Enemy weapons fired from all directions, sending torrents of plasma and particle beams toward the human ship. The Liberty's adaptive shields deflected most of the incoming fire while her hull absorbed impacts that would have destroyed any other vessel in the human fleet. Adams monitored the engineering displays as the ship's revolutionary systems responded to combat damage. Hull integrity holding at 87%. Adaptive armor is learning from each impact and adjusting molecular structure accordingly. The Liberty's weapons continued firing as she carved a path through the enemy formation. Each quantum cannon shot destroyed or crippled a Vorthan warship, while the ship's missile systems targeted vessels attempting to flank her position. The Dreadnought's ability to reconfigure her weapon loadouts during battle allowed her to adapt to changing tactical situations faster than enemy commanders could respond. Kane watched in amazement as his theoretical designs proved themselves in actual combat. Captain Prometheus is identifying weak points in their formation. The AI suggests we concentrate fire on their command vessels to disrupt their coordination. Davis approved the suggestion and watched as the Liberty's guns targeted the larger enemy ships that served as fleet coordination nodes. The destruction of these vessels caused confusion throughout the Vorthan formation as smaller ships lost their tactical guidance and began firing independently rather than as a coordinated force. The battle became a running engagement as the Liberty refused to be pinned down by superior numbers. The Dreadnought used her superior speed and maneuverability to strike at vulnerable targets, before disappearing into sensor shadows created by her experimental stealth systems. For the first time in decades, human weapons were destroying alien ships faster than the enemy could adapt to the threat. Hayes coordinated the defense as enemy missiles finally began finding their target. Multiple impacts on sections 7 through 12. Damage control teams responding. The Liberty shuddered as Vorthan weapons punched through her shields and armor. But the ship's self-repair systems immediately began sealing breaches and rerouting. Damaged systems? Human engineering had created a vessel that could absorb tremendous punishment while continuing to fight at full effectiveness. News of the battle spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks as countless civilizations watched a single human vessel engage an entire invasion fleet. The broadcast became a symbol of resistance for enslaved populations who had believed their alien masters were invincible. On conquered worlds throughout Vorthan space, subject species began to whisper that perhaps the Empire could be defeated. After all, Dr. Kane monitored communication intercepts as reports of the battle reached enslaved worlds. Captain, we're receiving messages from dozens of conquered systems. This engagement is inspiring resistance movements throughout the galaxy. Davis felt a moment of satisfaction despite their desperate situation. Even if the Liberty could not win this battle, her crew had already accomplished something significant by proving that human courage could challenge alien tyranny. The psychological impact of their defiance would outlast whatever happened in the Kepler system. The Vorthan fleet began adapting to the Liberty's tactics, using their superior numbers to create overlapping fields of fire that would be impossible to evade. Nexus Prime's voice echoed across all communication frequencies with grudging respect for human determination. Your vessel fights with admirable courage, Captain Davis, but mathematics will determine this battle's outcome. Davis prepared for the next phase of the engagement as more enemy ships closed in on their position. The Liberty had been fighting for 6 hours when the second wave of Vorthan ships arrived from hyperspace, adding another 1,000 vessels to an already overwhelming enemy force. Captain Roy Davis watched the tactical display with growing concern. As fresh alien warships moved to surround his battered Dreadnought, their hulls unmarked by battle while his own ship showed the scars of sustained combat, Chief Engineer Betty Adams reported from her station with the calm professionalism that had kept the Liberty fighting despite impossible odds. Captain, we've lost primary power to decks 15 through 23. Hull breaches on sections 4, 9, and 17 are sealed, but the armor plating is compromised. We're running on backup systems for life support in half the ship. The Dreadnought's revolutionary adaptive armor had learned to deflect many types of Vorthan weapons, but the sheer volume of incoming fire was slowly overwhelming even the most advanced defensive systems ever created by human engineering. Blast craters marked the Liberty's hull where enemy plasma cannons had punched through her protection, and several weapon turrets had been destroyed by focused bombardment. Dr. Peter Kane worked frantically at his portable interface, monitoring the ship's experimental systems while coordinating damage control efforts throughout the vessel. The 0-point core is showing stress indicators beyond safe parameters, he reported to the bridge crew. If we continue operating at maximum power output, we risk cascade failure. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes coordinated the tactical response. As Prometheus processed incoming threats faster than human minds could comprehend. Enemy reinforcements include their flagship, the Dominion Spear. That vessel is 3 times the size of anything we've faced so far. The Dominion Spear emerged from the center of the new formation like a mountain of metal and energy, its hull stretching over 4 kilometers in length and bristling with weapon systems that could reduce entire fleets to debris. The massive vessel served as the personal flagship of Nexus Prime, equipped with the most advanced technology the Vorthan Empire had developed over centuries of conquest. Davis studied the tactical display as enemy ships moved into position around the Liberty, using quantum interdiction fields to prevent any possibility of escape. The Vorthans had finally abandoned their rigid tactical doctrines in favor of overwhelming force, determined to end the battle before the human Dreadnought could inspire more resistance throughout the galaxy. Sir, we're receiving massive energy readings from the enemy flagship, Hayes reported. They're charging some kind of super weapon. Kane looked up from his interface with alarm spreading across his features. Captain, those energy signatures match theoretical projections for quantum torpedo systems. If they fire that weapon at us, our shields won't be able to deflect the impact. The Liberty had proven that human ingenuity could create weapons capable of destroying individual Vorthan vessels, But the quantum torpedoes aboard the Dominion Spear represented technology beyond anything humanity had encountered. The massive projectiles could phase through conventional shields and armor, delivering their destructive payload directly to a target's internal systems. Adams monitored the engineering displays as the ship's power core showed increasingly dangerous fluctuations. "Captain, the zero-point generator is approaching critical instability. The stress from continuous maximum output is causing quantum fluctuations that could tear apart local spacetime." Davis realized that his ship faced destruction from two different sources. The Vorthan superweapon would arrive in minutes, while the Liberty's own power core threatened to explode with enough force to devastate everything within several light hours of their position. Human engineering had created a weapon powerful enough to challenge an empire, but that same power might destroy them along with their enemies. Kane suddenly stopped his frantic work at the interface and looked up with the expression of someone who had just solved an impossible equation. "Captain, I have an idea that might turn this disaster into an opportunity." "What do you mean, Doctor?" Kane activated a holographic display showing the Liberty's power core and its connection to the ship's various systems. "The quantum instability we're experiencing isn't random. The zero-point field is resonating with local spacetime in a pattern that could be controlled and directed rather than simply contained." Hayes looked confused as she tried to understand the scientist's explanation. "You're suggesting we use our power core as a weapon?" "Not exactly," Kane replied, his voice gaining excitement as he worked through the theoretical implications. "If we trigger a controlled cascade failure, we can create a spatial disruption that will propagate outward at faster than light speeds. The effect would be similar to a quantum torpedo, but on a vastly larger scale." Adams understood the engineering aspects better than the tactical implications. "Doctor, are you talking about deliberately causing the core to explode?" Kane nodded grimly. "The explosion would destroy everything within a radius of several light hours, including the entire Vorthan fleet and any human colonies in neighboring systems. It's not a weapon we can use without accepting enormous casualties." Davis felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. The decision Kane was asking him to make would save humanity from conquest, but at the cost of millions of innocent lives on nearby worlds. The moral calculus of war had never presented such a terrible choice to any human commander. "How long would we have once you trigger the cascade?" Davis asked. "Approximately 12 minutes from initiation to detonation," Kane replied. "Enough time to evacuate non-essential personnel, but not enough to reach minimum safe distance." The captain looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear in their faces. These men and women had volunteered to serve aboard humanity's most desperate gamble, knowing that their mission would likely end in death. Now he was asking them to make the ultimate sacrifice not just for their own species but for every enslaved civilization in the galaxy. Hayes coordinated with the ship's internal communication system to address all hands. "Captain, we should inform the crew of our situation and give them the choice." Davis activated the ship-wide intercom system, his voice carrying to every compartment of the massive vessel. "This is the captain speaking. Our mission has reached its final phase. Dr. Kane has developed a way to destroy the entire enemy fleet. But the weapon requires our ship and our lives to activate. Anyone who wishes to evacuate should report to escape pod stations immediately." The response surprised everyone on the bridge. Rather than rushing toward the escape pods, crew members throughout the ship reported to their battle stations and confirmed their readiness to continue fighting. Engineers sealed themselves into the power core compartments while weapons crews loaded their final ammunition. The Liberty's complement of 800 souls had chosen to die as heroes rather than live as survivors. Adams began the evacuation of essential personnel while maintaining power to critical systems. "Captain, escape pods are launching for all crew members with families. The rest of us are staying to see this through." Kane initiated the preliminary sequences for the cascade failure, watching his displays show quantum field fluctuations building toward the point of no return. "Cascade initiation in 60 seconds, Captain." Once I trigger the sequence, there will be no way to stop it. Davis looked out at the stars one final time, knowing that in 12 minutes the Liberty would join them as scattered atoms drifting through space. Dr. Kane, you may fire when ready. The escape pods scattered across the Kepler system like seeds from a dying flower as Dr. Peter Kane initiated the zero-point cascade that would destroy everything within several light hours of their position. Captain Roy Davis watched the evacuation status reports with satisfaction, knowing that over 300 of his crew members would survive to tell the story of humanity's greatest act of defiance against galactic tyranny. Chief Engineer Betty Adams remained at her station in the engineering section, monitoring power flow systems as the Liberty's core began its transformation from controlled energy source to cosmic weapon. The quantum field surrounding the zero-point generator pulsed with increasing instability, sending waves of exotic radiation through the ship's superstructure that made the hull plate sing with harmonic frequencies. Cascade progression is nominal. Kane reported from his position near the bridge's main tactical display. We have 11 minutes until detonation. The spatial disruption will propagate outward at approximately 3 times the speed of light once the reaction reaches critical mass. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes coordinated the ship's final approach toward the heart of the Vorthan fleet, using the Liberty's remaining maneuvering thrusters to aim the Dreadnought directly at the enemy flagship Dominion Spear. Captain, enemy vessels are concentrating fire on our position. They must realize we're attempting some kind of desperate attack. The Liberty's hull glowed white-hot from accumulated damage as Vorthan plasma cannons and particle beams poured energy into the approaching human vessel. Sections of armor plating peeled away like flower petals, exposing the ship's internal framework to the vacuum of space. Emergency bulkheads sealed themselves automatically as atmosphere vented through dozens of hull breaches. But the Dreadnought continued its inexorable advance toward the enemy formation. Davis activated the ship's external communication array one final time, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every inhabited world in the galaxy could hear humanity's last message. This is Captain Roy Davis of the USS Liberty. We came here to remind the universe that free people don't surrender to tyranny. We don't kneel to those who would make us slaves. We fight until our last breath, and then we fight some more. The Dominion Spear's massive quantum torpedo systems finally achieved full charge, sending their deadly projectiles toward the Liberty with enough destructive force to vaporize entire moons. The weapons phased through the Dreadnought's failing shields and detonated within her hull structure, tearing apart sections of the ship that had survived 6 hours of sustained combat. The Liberty shuddered like a wounded animal but continued closing the distance to her target. Adams reported from engineering as her section, filled with smoke from overloaded power conduits. Captain, we've lost containment on the secondary fusion reactors. Hull integrity is down to 37%. The ship is breaking apart around us. Kane watched his instruments show quantum field fluctuations approaching the point of irreversible cascade failure. 8 minutes to detonation. The reaction is now self-sustaining and cannot be stopped by any known means. The AI system Prometheus continued processing tactical data even as the ship's computer cores suffered damage from enemy weapons and internal explosions. The artificial intelligence had learned to fight alongside humans during the battle, adapting its cold logic to work with the organic creativity and determination that defined human warfare. Now it calculated the optimal detonation position to maximize damage to the enemy fleet, while minimizing harm to nearby human colonies. Hayes monitored the approach to the Vorthan flagship as the Liberty closed to within a few thousand kilometers of the massive alien vessel. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Nexus Prime. The bridge speakers crackled with static as the Vorthan commander's translated voice filled the air. Captain Davis, your actions demonstrate the savage nobility that makes your species both admirable and dangerous. The Empire acknowledges your courage even as we prepare to witness your destruction. Davis smiled grimly as he composed his final response to the alien leader who had spent 30 years conquering human worlds. Nexus Prime, you made one critical error in your calculations? You assume that humans fear death more than slavery. Today you learn the truth about our species. The Liberty's quantum cannons fired their final salvo at point-blank range, sending streams of coherent energy directly into the Dominion Spear's hull. The massive alien flagship staggered under the assault as its shields overloaded and armor plating vaporized under the concentrated bombardment. For the first time in the battle, the Vorthans experienced what it felt like to face weapons designed by desperate human engineers who refused to accept limitations. Kane announced the final countdown as quantum field fluctuations reached critical mass. 2 minutes to cascade failure. All hands, prepare for a final detonation. The crew of the Liberty used their remaining time to send personal messages to loved ones through quantum communication networks that would carry their words across the galaxy faster than the explosion that would claim their lives. Engineers sealed emergency bulkheads to protect the ship's core systems for as long as possible, while weapons crews fired their last ammunition at surrounding enemy vessels. Adams monitored the zero-point core as its containment fields began their final collapse. Captain, quantum resonance is building to terminal levels. The space-time disruption will be visible from neighboring star systems. Davis looked around the bridge at his remaining crew members, seeing calm determination in their faces despite the approaching end. These men and women had chosen to die as heroes rather than live as slaves, making a sacrifice that would echo through history for as long as humans remembered their own story. The explosion that followed became known as the Kepler flash, a burst of energy so intense that it outshone entire solar systems for several seconds. The zero-point cascade tore through the Vorthan fleet like a cosmic scythe, converting matter directly into energy as the fabric of space-time itself bent and twisted around the epicenter of the detonation. Over 2,000 alien warships vanished in the initial wave of destruction, while the remainder suffered catastrophic damage from secondary effects. Nexus Prime's final transmission reached human communication networks just before the Dominion Spear dissolved into its component atoms. The humans fight like demons incarnate. Perhaps the Empire has underestimated the price of their conquest. The psychological impact of the Liberty's sacrifice proved even greater than its immediate military results. Across the galaxy, enslaved species witnessed the destruction of the supposedly invincible Vorthan fleet by a single human vessel crewed by volunteers who chose death over surrender. Within hours, uprisings began on dozens of conquered worlds as subject populations realized their alien masters could be defeated by sufficient determination and courage. The surviving Vorthan forces retreated from human space for the first time in 30 years, their commanders shaken by the demonstration of human resolve. The Empire's rigid military doctrine had no response to an enemy willing to destroy itself to achieve victory, creating a psychological vulnerability that resistance movements throughout the galaxy would exploit in the years that followed. Admiral Jake Morrison received reports of the battle's outcome from Kepler Station, watching rescue ships collect the Liberty's escape pods, while long-range sensors confirmed the complete destruction of the Vorthan invasion fleet. The sacrifice of 800 volunteers had saved billions of lives and turned the tide of a war that had seemed hopeless just days before. The USS Liberty's wreckage now drifts through the void of the Kepler system, her broken hull serving as a monument to human defiance against impossible odds. But her true legacy lives on in every ship that follows her design principles, carrying the lesson that even the mightiest empires can fall when they face free people who refuse to surrender their dignity to live as slaves. 5 years later, human fleets built around revolutionary Dreadnought technology liberated every world conquered by the Vorthan Empire, proving that the Liberty sacrifice had been the beginning of victory rather than the end of hope.